Successful secrets that great writers know. What are they? Can they help you become the greatest writer you can be? What is it that great writers know that they don't share with anybody on how they become a successful writer? We're going to be answering those questions and more, and we're starting right now. Your average new writer finds themselves just sitting at their laptop, looking at their screen, waiting for ideas to come to them. They walk through a bookstore and they see all the books for sale. They look at the literary classics and wonder, why can't I write like that? Whenever a successful writer is asked, how do you become a successful writer? They say things like, well, you have to work hard, be dedicated. And a lot of amateur writers do that. They are successful. They are dedicated. They work hard, but they just don't have a published novel. They they're not successful like the big names are. So something must be out there. There must be something different that successful writers know and do differently than your average writer. Well, here's the secret. Whenever a writer sits down and writes, they're not writing for the critics. They're not writing for the millions of dollars. They're not writing to please strangers. They don't care about how many books they sell. Whenever a great writer sits down and writes, they have one person in mind, someone who they want to read their novel and love it. They want someone who's going to be moved by their novel. Stephen King, when he writes his novel, he wants his wife, Tabitha, to read his book and be moved by it. He hopes to make her laugh with something funny or to scare her with something scary. He doesn't write for the critics. He doesn't write for the millions of dollars. He's motivated to impress one person. When he was younger, he would want to write to impress his mother. But after his mother passed away, he started writing to impress his wife, Tabitha. As a writer, whenever you set out to do something, when you want to write a novel, don't put pressure on yourself to please the critics. Don't set out to please the millions of people around the world. When you're writing, you should be writing for one person. Imagine if your best friend or someone you care about is to read what you've written and you want them to be moved. You're not thinking about the people, you're thinking about one person in particular. And it's like a lot of comedians say that they write their jokes because they want one certain person in their life to laugh. It could be a family member, it could be their wife, it could be a stranger, like a neighbor. But a lot of successful comedians say that they write having one person in mind who they're trying to make laugh. Stephen King sets out to write for only one person. His books end up selling in the millions, but in fact, he was writing for one person. When somebody writes poetry, when you look at some of the greatest poetry writers and you ask them, how do you write such great poetry? Their answer is that they set out to please one person, maybe their wife, their child, a family member. They're actually only writing for one person. Some of the greatest love songs of all time were written by one songwriter, specifically thinking of one person in mind, who they wanted to sing that song to and impress them. And in the process, they ended up writing a song that sold millions. But they weren't thinking about the critics. They weren't thinking about the money. They simply wanted to please one person. As a writer, you have to ask yourself, who is that one person that you're writing for? Who is that one person who you would like to see read what you've written and be impressed by it? Because when you think about the critics and you think about the money, it puts stress on you. And that stress can cause you to stop writing. But when you're writing for one person only, it motivates you. It gives you energy to keep on writing because you can't wait to finish. And that's what compels you to just keep writing page after page because you want to finish as fast as you can because you want to hand that book to that person and you want to stand back and watch them read it to see their reaction. If they laugh at something that's funny, that is what motivates you. Now, you can have that book sold to the public and it can make millions of people around the world laugh. But what motivates you is that one particular person. That's what motivates you to get up and to keep writing as fast as possible because you want to entertain that person, that one particular person. The philosopher Plato said that when he was thinking of all of those great ideas that he is now famous for, he pictured himself sitting in a room with other great well-known philosophers, and he pictured them saying great powerful things, in which he then pictured himself saying something in which the other philosophers in the room would be impressed with what he had to say. Because he pictured himself in a room with other smart philosophers, he felt as though that forced him to step up, to really push himself to the limit, to come up with some really powerful statements to impress the other philosophers. Even though they were all in his mind, to him they were real. In his mind, when he pictured himself daydreaming in a room with other philosophers, that was real to him. If he pictured himself saying something was mediocre, he would legitimately see the other philosophers looking down upon him. So it forced him to come up with something really powerful, to be loved and accepted by the other philosophers. And by doing so, he wrote down what he thought. And to this day, thousands of years later, we still read what Plato had to say. If he was just thinking it in his head, his thoughts might be weak. But because he daydreamed himself in a room with other philosophers, it forced him to really step up. This is a technique that you can try as a writer. Can you picture your book being read by other great literary classic writers and being impressed with it? This would force you to really step up your game to writing an amazing novel to impress the great literary writers of our time. But all great people who excel at what they've done, what they're known for, they all had to practice and practice, and they had to go to school. Vincent van Gogh went to school to learn how to paint. Stephen King went to school to learn how to write. And Pavarotti had to take singing lessons. One of the silly ideas is that you have to be born a great writer, or you just don't bother. The fact is, some of the greatest writers had to take time to learn how to write. A lot of writers today believe that if you're not perfect right away, then you have to quit. The fact is, even some of the greatest writers were rejected, and they too had to practice, practice, and practice, just like Eric Clapton playing guitar. In order for Eric Clapton to be a great guitar player, he had to practice, and that's something that we didn't see. We never saw him practicing. We just saw him perfect on stage. But if you want to be a writer, you need to practice just as much as Eric Clapton had to practice playing the guitar. But Stephen King will tell you that he has fun writing. A lot of amateur writers feel angry and depressed, and we have this idea that if you're a writer, you have to be angry and moody and not like what you've written. Stephen King says that he has a fun time writing. He says it brings him joy. This is why even now in his 70s, he is still writing as much as he did when he was a teenager, because it brings him happiness. Chances are, if you're writing and you're not happy, you're going to stop writing, because why would you keep going? You have to find joy in writing. And this is something that a lot of writers don't tell us, that you have to feel happy when writing. Of course, you have to take it serious, but don't be angry with yourself. Have fun while writing, and you would be amazed how much you want to keep on writing. The biggest obstacle you will ever face in your life as a writer is yourself. Don't put these barriers in front of you. You have to learn to become your own best friend. If all you do is critique and not like anything you do, then you're going to not want to keep writing. You have to have fun, and you have to like what you do. And don't be your biggest obstacle. Find that one person who you're writing for. Write for them. Write something that's funny or scary or romantic or whatever, and picture them reading it and enjoying it. Not the critics, not the millions of people around the world, but just that one person who you want to impress with your writing. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my website, where I have a ton of blogs that will help you become the greatest writer you can be. Because that's what I want to do. I want to help you get published as fast as possible. In fact, I'm going to leave a link to my website in the description down below, and you can visit it right now. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my next video on how you can examine your novel up close and far away, and how it can benefit you to become the greatest writer you can be. In fact, I'm going to leave a link to that video right here, and you can click on it and start watching right now.